we're looking for dynamic media sales executives to join our team. Sell powerful advertising solutions across television, digital, and social media platforms, and help brands tell their story. If you have strong communication skills, a passion for sales, and the drive to succeed, join WESN today. Send your CV to marketing@wsncc.com or WhatsApp 6861662 and start building your future.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fanzone, 2 locations nationwide, Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing@wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
WESN.
One of the new realities that we faced at the end of last year was that the headlines of military action were no longer, or at least you could say once again, no longer, something that occurred on distant lands. Now, granted, there has always been some level of conflict brewing or happening in certain parts of the Western Hemisphere, which is not necessarily that far away from us. But ironically, because classification of violence is a big political thing right now, usually it was seen within the lens of the war against drugs combined with some sort of civil war strife. And I guess it was easy for us in most of those cases to take it for granted. It's not bothering us. Of course, I can't give an opinion with regards to when the United States went into Grenada. I was barely alive at the time. If I was, I can't remember what year it was. If it was 89, I would have been barely alive. But last year, of course, now, the implication was it was happening not just in the region, and it was something that was active, and it was something that was international, but we even hosted equipment and had personnel come here. We even potentially had 2 of our nationals caught up in all of that. So now that the government has made a move to declare certain organizations as terrorist organizations, you wonder, is it the case where this is another round of politics? Because the whole zone of peace and what is narco trafficking versus narco terrorism, is it domestic crime, even though technically transnational crime is not domestic crime, but then it's viewed as a domestic issue internal, even though that the source of a lot of criminal operations are external, but it's still somehow civilian. Because again, the whole war against drugs scenario, it's not just something that somebody rolled off of their bed, you know, in September last year and just had a bright idea. This was something that was considered by the American military for quite some time. And in part, it has already been considered by military and military police throughout Latin America for quite some time. We just kind of take it for granted because things aren't that bad here. Now, we have had quote-unquote terrorism in a very light way touch our society because, of course, the belief is that a certain small group of our citizens were radicalized, went off to the Middle East, and now their dependents, there are enough of us who seemingly have grave concerns over the radicalization of their children and their wives and what that might mean. Whether that's fair or not is separate to the point. We have at times touched on real international issues of conflict, and it seems as though our lack of experience is somewhat telling with regards to how we respond to these things. So now that the government has decided, and even the timing of it, you could argue, is political, but while some would say, and this is the obvious assumption, oh, well, the Americans are doing a thing, so we just follow in their lead. Part of the politics is actually having to wait so long before declaring an organization like Hamas a terrorist organization, because if you did so during the protests when Israel were at their zenith of what they were doing to the Palestinians in Gaza, that may or may not have been very unpopular over here. So it's interesting that, of course, it took so long for certain things to be done. I would imagine those organizations were considered terrorist organizations by certain Western governments, not just Israel, for quite some time. The timing that we did it was interesting. Now the question is, to what degree is it an actual issue that we Trinbagonians, are we taking it on? Are we taking it seriously? Are we taking it for granted? Is it not that important because it's oh so far away? Well, with regards to the details of it, right now, we have been told, at least by Senator Naked, the AG will provide further details with regards to that situation. Of course, he has been questioned given his stance previously. It does make sense for the media to go to him specifically with regards to his private capacity. Now, he has said his position is always with the government. People will make their judgment either way, and the AG will give you the information that you need in subsequent time. Now, I always have an issue with the government not being transparent, but with security issues, there's a catch, because there usually will be times where those lack of transparency issues are at least somewhat legitimate, right? It all varies, of course. And it's difficult for us on the outside knowing in when those times are with any degree of certainty, because that's the catch. We don't know what it is. We don't know what they don't want to tell us, so we can't judge it for ourselves. So we are supposed to give the government the benefit of the doubt, take them at their word, trust them. Of course, I would argue that locally, trust and politics doesn't really go that well together right now, unless you're a diehard supporter of the speaker, of the party that is speaking. However, one of the indicators of why it might be legitimate that the government is having to wait in order to expand on the details further, well, the U.S. has maintained a level 3, this is one report this morning, travel advisory for TNT, urging travelers to reconsider visiting this country due to ongoing crime concerns and what it described as a heightened risk of terrorism. So, adjustments were made to the U.S. State Department's advisory, the content of what they were advising, not necessarily the severity, the degree. So beyond the crime stuff, it highlighted the potential risk of terrorist activity, possible attacks, and directs travelers to review additional security information provided by U.S. authorities. Now, it's hard not to consider, is there something specific that they are speaking about, or is it just a general assumption? The general assumption is, A, there might be certain vulnerabilities or holes or pathways, so we're just going to give a general warning because there's some expectation that perhaps avenues for reprisals against U.S. citizens might include not third world countries, but rather third-party countries. We're not in the Middle East, right? However, there is technically a pre-established travel routes from the Middle East to this part of the world. A lot of regional Muslim practitioners go through Venezuela in order to go on pilgrimage. It's not too much of a stress to think individuals obviously can't come in the opposite direction through the same routes. Now, this is a lot of heavy speculation, but the problem is the American government doing this in order to play it safe. Meanwhile, we publicly have to kind of bear this new dimension to our travel advisory, right? Or again, is there something specific? So once you start to get now into other external factors, you can't necessarily just look and judge the government and decide, hey, what you're doing, you need to tell us more, whatever, because now, potentially, there are things that they might not even know, depending. They could only respond to what's being, I guess you could say, done to us, or what's given to us, told to us. It's not like we have one of the top-ranked international intelligence agencies around the world. So, and one of our, of course, local national security, former national security ministers, someone with a lot of experience in the space, Guy Griffith, he had an interesting things to say. If this is not done, meaning declaring these organizations as terrorist groups and then putting steps in place to prevent the flow of their money, resources, and potentially personnel from coming through or to TNT, if this is not done, these terrorist groups, it happened with myself as minister with ISIS, it's happening now with these 3 other terrorist organizations. They fund hundreds of millions of dollars, siphon it into different accounts, into different arms, then support them in different countries. These organizations then use these funds to be able to train individuals and then try to get them to go across into the Middle East to become what is known as FTFs. They bring them back to Trinidad and Tobago or whatever other country to spread that degree of terrorism. This is why we have to be very careful. That is why the importance of the Financial Intelligence Unit working with other financial intelligence agencies to know that Hezbollah, ISIS, or whoever, they are now putting funds into an organization or an individual. Now, and part of it could be because a lot of these organizations are facing direct military confrontation. It could also be that they're looking to go to ground. And if you're being attacked in the Middle East, you're not going to try and unnecessarily hide in the Middle East. Allegedly, our gang leaders, at least some of them, of course, there's a big thing about the state emergency and we'll catch the gang leaders, only to find out that there's at least anecdotal evidence to suggest one, if not more, outside of the country, outside of the reach of our police service and the potential benefits of the state of emergency in order to arrest them and gather evidence against them and prosecute them, unless, of course, we have enough to hopefully start extradition proceedings if we have such a treaty in place. So if our local gangsters could figure that out, can't the foreign organizations who, and this is where the other thing that you have to consider now, we have made it no secret with regards to our allegiance. And again, I'm not saying I have an issue with that. The practical side of it is, if you are declaring an alliance, a friendship, a close relationship with somebody, obviously, and this is an everyday life thing, you want to say that's your friend? Well, whoever is his enemies might end up being your enemies. Now, of course, a lot of us Trinbagonians, we like to have selective relationships, right? That's my friend. Yeah, he owe me money. Well, I don't know him that well. Or if there's a conflict in a friend group, the non-confrontational side of us, which is probably a little bit too large and too overcompensating at times. Not with everybody, some people don't have it enough, but the non-confrontational side of us, we don't want to get involved and pick sides. Yeah, but to the people involved, you kind of are picking a side, even if you do nothing. Even if you do nothing to affect the situation. Your silence, in a way, is benefiting one of the parties. And it's nothing, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just saying that it might be viewed very differently to the party that feels some sort of grievance, whether their grievance is legitimate or not. It doesn't matter. Now, former Coast Guard officer Norman Dillier, he disagreed. He said we have no legal obligation or national security justification to designate these organizations as terrorist organizations. The UN Security Council has not done so. Again, the UN Security Council is not a legitimate body to get a good faith consensus, because generally speaking, the permanent members, any one of them could veto anything. So generally speaking, you never hear the UN Security Council actively engaging in the business in order to suppress conflict in any meaningful way that involves anyone tied to members, permanent members of the Security Council. And the thought or the belief is that, yes, the situation in the Middle East, even if they don't have strong, and one could argue they do, but even if they don't have strong ties, there's a sort of gamesmanship. The United States can't just go around declaring people terrorist organizations without vetoes coming down the pipe. Now, some might say, well, it is right for them to veto the declaration. But I'm just saying, it's not like we had a debate in the situation and we have good reasoning for or against. So that is not really a good litmus test. If you could say Europe hasn't done it, whatever organizations of nations in Asia hasn't done it, Africa hasn't done it, that's different. Because on some level, they are voicing their opinion. But the Security Council is not a place to consider what the consensus is. More often than not, on any sort of strategic situation, there's disagreement, and all it takes, again, is one person to veto it. Listen, they could try to have a resolution in the Security Council to condemn Russia for invading Ukraine. Russia will veto it. They could have a resolution to condemn the United States for the war on terror when they went into Afghanistan, when they went into Iraq, when they're going into Iran. Now the United States will veto it. China could invade Taiwan tomorrow, and then you could have everybody decide to have a resolution to condemn China's invasion of Taiwan. China will veto it. So I find that statement to be quite useless. I don't know how else to say it, right? Now, he's gone on to say, I believe this is the International Court of Justice has not done so. Unilateral sanctions based on foreign lists are legally dubious and politically risky. Yes, it is politically risky. We live in a politically risky time. I don't know if you noticed. So, I guess now it's just a wait and see. The one last thing about this is that local Muslim groups, they met to discuss this situation, because I guess the concern is that how do you separate religious organizations versus some of these groups that are tied, at least on the surface, to the religion, and what potential unintended consequence, backlash, fallout might be suffered locally, because they are saying it could also affect their organizations, their funding to their organizations locally, right? And this is part of the problem. Those individuals who are bad guys aren't going to make it easy. But then on top of that, this whole situation internationally is very politically charged, is very politically complex. And I guess one of the reasons why we probably haven't done anything like this before is just to wade into those complex waters is not so simple, it's not that easy. But the question is, going back to what Guy Griffith said, you know, is this a situation that we could ignore? Why are the Americans saying risk of terrorism? Is it just meant to scare us, to make us do this move and to go down this path? Or is there something specific to it that we don't know about? Does the government know? I'm not sure. But it's just one more instance where we could no longer look at the news and just assume everything is happening over there and we are safe over here and we don't have to worry about it and we don't have to take it on. Let's take a break. When we come back, hopefully, I should have the good lady. Stay tuned.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios. But they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Hi, I am Emiliana Beechan and I am a mental health and conflict resolution consultant. Welcome to Mind Matters, the show where we explore the intricate world of mental health and the art of conflict resolution. Join us as we hear from mental health professionals, conflict resolution experts, and everyday people who have transformed their lives through understanding and communication. Mind Matters, WESN Content Capital.
There are limitations in all the healthcare sectors,
Correct.
not just this country,
Yes.
where the numbers will surpass the amount of doctors and nurses to provide that quality care. We're talking about holding a patient's hand, giving them the support, emotional support that they need, advice. That gap, you are providing that pivotal gap, so that really makes you stand out from all other NGOs as far as my experience goes.
Yes, I actually go into the homes also of the patients.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Are you driven, ambitious, and ready to earn? WESN, the content capital, is expanding, and we're looking for dynamic media sales executives to join our team. Sell powerful advertising solutions across television, digital, and social media platforms, and help brands tell their story. If you have strong communication skills, a passion for sales, and the drive to succeed, join WESN today. Send your CV to marketing@wsncc.com or WhatsApp 6861662 and start building your future.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing@wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward and our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage. And we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
I'm back here and talk about the WSND Content Capital Show. Michael Small, joined via Zoom by the good lady herself. Of course, I'm speaking of our former Minister of Finance, Karen Neshishero. Karen, good morning from distant lands, not so distant lands.
It is fairly distant, but I'm happy to be here. Of course, the background is a little different, but I hope it's not too distracting. I'm happy to be here with you show this morning, and of course, as usual, hopefully we bring something to the viewership that will be helpful in their understanding of the issues that are affecting not only globally, but more particularly our region.
And it seems as though, at least for those of us, of course, you and I, we do not work within CARICOM. We are not a head of any state. We are not a diplomat. But it seems as though our region somehow, we were always a voting bloc in the UN, but somehow now what's going on internationally might be affecting what's going on regionally a lot more, maybe, right? That's one of the things that comes to mind, of course, because the United States being such a big player. But there's the situation with CARICOM right now specifically is technically about the reappointment of the Secretary General. But it's just one of those things where even some of the local stakeholders ask the question, exactly what happened? What is the issue here specifically? Is it just a procedural one? Is there something deeper with regards to the politics that we're not told? Because the level of conflict, I guess you could say, political disagreement over this, I'm not sure when is the last time CARICOM has experienced something quite like this.
Yes, well, CARICOM has been experiencing something quite like this with the zone of peace, which really speaks to what you're intimating, that is it just about, to use a term that Mr. Trump or President Trump uses, kerfuffle, is it just making much ado about nothing, a storm in a teacup, or is it really continuation of a precedent or a trend that we're seeing from our Prime Minister and our government? And I'm not here to say whether that position is right or wrong. In fact, I'm not in a position to do that at all because I'm neither in the government nor a member of the Foreign Affairs Ministry, and they will have unique and peculiar knowledge to which we would not be available to us. So, but what we do know is that our Prime Minister has consistently seen herself almost as a cheerleader of the United States in so many areas, and this is just one more example, in my respectful opinion, of that continuation of what I see as coming out of the CARICOM, which is now being very fractured. These are statements coming from the CARICOM itself, and taking a position in support, very vociferously, in support of the United States. Who reasoning for that? I'm not going to try to go into that because, as I said, if you look at it just very much superficially, one could say perhaps we have benefited, certainly with the tariff removal from our ammonia and urea, which are important for fertilizers. That was removed. We also know that we are benefiting, whether indirectly or otherwise, from increasing the price of natural gas and oil. And of course, what we're seeing is the support. I don't know where it will end, but support for us having access to the natural gas in Dragon Feast. So I'm not here to critique whether or not the Prime Minister position is right or wrong. I may have my own views on it, but what I will say, this recent issue is only, in my view, a continuation of what our Prime Minister sees as not playing or really pleasing President Trump and pleasing the United States. So what is the issue? The issue, which seemed pretty minor, was that there was a heads of government meeting, or I think they called it a conference, a conference in Bastille, St. Kitts, and it was held between April 24th and April 27th. There was the opening ceremony, but included in the agenda was not only the conference itself, but a retreat. And the importance of the retreat was not only to discuss operational issues, according to what was said in the agenda notification, but it was also to discuss the reappointment of Dr. Carla Barnett as the CARICOM Secretary General. I think that is a sticking point, and that is where Trinidad and Tobago has taken a position, even before the meeting itself, that they would not going to support her reappointment. So what happened? Our Prime Minister, according to reports that we have read, our Prime Minister, I'm saying our, yes, she is our Prime Minister, Kamala Prasad-Bissessar, has gone on record as saying she was uninvited to the retreat. Now, she's not saying that she was not invited to the conference, but in the conference, I think on the 26th, they were going to have the retreat, and that is where the reappointment of Dr. Barnett was going to be considered and determined. So from the 24th to the 27th, the Prime Minister was, including her Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Sobers, it's not Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, I mean more correct,
yes.
Would attend, and the Prime Minister did attend the opening, and in fact she gave her opening speech, which again I will refer to, which in my respectful opinion only reinforces the view that she wants to be seen, at least by the United States, as very much in their corner, almost being more than just a supporter, but more of a cheerleader within the CARICOM region, which is of geopolitical importance, not only because of where we are, but because we have countries such as Venezuela and Cuba, which has the geopolitics, but of course Venezuela with all the oil. And Guyana also, I almost forgot also Guyana. So what does it mean of uninvited? That's the first thing I tried to see. I said, what does the Prime Minister mean when she says she was uninvited? Because it could mean you're unwelcome. I looked it up. It said unwelcome. It also said you were invited and your invitation was withdrawn. I'm not sure that any evidence or information was provided by the Prime Minister to show that the invitation to the retreat in particular was withdrawn, and she was unwelcome, was invited, and then the invitation withdrawn, because from all the, particularly from the chairman of that conference, as well as the Prime Minister of St. Kitts Nevis, Dr. Terence Drew, in the 11-page response to what our Prime Minister has said, clearly disagrees with her. But it goes beyond it. But let me just say what are the facts in a sense. I don't think this is in dispute. What occurred? The meeting was supposed to have had, the conference was between April. Did I say February before?
I can't remember.
I said February. Maybe I said February because there was a meeting in February, which is an earlier meeting. But April, let me get it right there. But it has to be, sorry, so let me get the dates right, because I don't want to mix up the dates. Yes, it's February, correct. So the meeting was February 24th to February 27th. And our Prime Minister was supposed to give a speech at the opening ceremony, which our Prime Minister did. According to what is recorded, is they said on the, I think on the 20th, so the meeting was the 24th to the 27th. On the 25th, I believe, at 10:33 p.m., our Prime Minister departed and left St. Kitts. And then, of course, the retreat was going to be held on the 26th. Also, on the same date, at 10:55, on the same day, February 25th, the Minister of Foreign Affairs also made a call, and he made a call also to the chairman of the conference, Dr. Drew, as I understand it, and someone else who had the authority to say that he suffered from nausea, he got seasickness, he doesn't know if he could make it to the conference retreat. It's a retreat they're talking about, where the appointment of Dr. Barnett was to be made or considered. I said he didn't think he could make it. He was told, well, even if and it was only for heads of government. That retreat was for heads of government. He was told, as I understand it, one party said, well, it's okay, you don't have to come. It's probably the uninvited part, I'm not sure. And another one, I think Dr. Drew may have said that, well, there are other heads of government who can't attend, and they send a representative. In any event, our Prime Minister, neither she nor after that invitation was given to our Minister of Foreign Affairs, this is my understanding, he did not respond. He did not say, okay, well, I'll go by plane. I've been to Nevis myself. You take a little plane, takes half an hour, if that much, to get across from St. Kitts to Nevis. And it's a light aeroplane. I'm not so sure what the issue really would have been getting there, but in any event, he never responded, according to what we were told, to either possibility, either that he didn't have to attend, or he could have attended, or he could have sent someone. The point was, no one attended representing Trinidad at the heads of government retreat meeting. According now, we're getting accounts. Now, according to our Prime Minister, she has said that what she did, which is quite strange though, what she called for, she said the meeting was surreptitious and odious. She uses very strong language, I must say.
Yeah.
But in the event, continuing in her language, use of language, surreptitious and odious. She said that what's complained about, our Prime Minister complained about, was where was the minutes of the meeting? Why wasn't the minutes of the meeting circulated and provided to them? And also, she also wondered what was the qualification of Dr. Carla Barnett? Was he suitable for the position? And that, by the way, was consistent with a position that Trinidad and Tobago had taken, even before the meeting, that they were not going to support Dr. Carla Barnett, which I will look at in more detail. The other point that she did make was, and that was a more important one, I think, is that she said that the reappointment of Dr. Barnett was not included on the agenda for the retreat. That is what she had said. Dr. Drew responded in an 11-page document. He said that in the notification of the meeting, retreat meeting, of the all the meetings entirely included was a heading called Financing and Government, I can't even government community effort. In any event, he's saying that in that notification before the meeting, they were advised, all member states were advised that the retreat was being held and that they were told the date, the venue, and the purpose of that meeting. And the retreat would not only look at operational issues, but they were specifically going to look at the question of reappointment of Dr. Carla Barnett for the second time. This is what he said, and included, he talked about of no consequence really, saying that they had delayed the meeting to allow all members to attend. But the point about that is this: so you have our Prime Minister saying the retreat never said that we were going to look at that, and he is saying, Dr. Drew is saying that is not correct. And more to the point, and as is more to the point, is that it says that the all member states said they were duly informed. This is what he said. All member states were duly informed of all the official events, the draft agenda, and the program of work, which would have taken place not any plenary sessions and the heads of government session in the retreat. He said the date and venue of the retreat were heads of government informed by official correspondence, and that the reappointment of the Secretary General was to be considered in accordance with Article 24 of the revised Treaty of Chagarama. So I don't think you can get more pointed in your response to that. You did get a response from about 11 member states who all agreed that they were notified in advance of the meeting, and they were aware at the meeting, according to what I have been able to assess, distill from the report, that they were aware of the meeting and they knew what the meeting was going to consider. However, what is I think the most, I don't really want to use the word damning, because that's a strong word to use, but I think hearing from President Irfan Ali, Dr. Irfan Ali, President of Guyana, who has been a friend of Trinidad and Tobago, they're dealing with many of the same issues that we are. They are fighting Venezuela in the Essequibo region, saying that much of that land belongs to Guyana, and America is being very supportive of that. And of course, we have been taking the side of America in the zone of peace argument, that we support America against Venezuela. So I think Dr. Irfan Ali is seen clearly as a friend of the United States and a friend of our Prime Minister. And this is what he said. And I'm reading from the report. Based on statements regarding the 2026 meeting of the heads of government, he stated, these are his words, all proper procedures were followed regarding the process for meetings and discussions of Trinidad and Tobago's absence from a Pacific retreat. He said the process was followed for CARICOM meetings and nothing was wrong with the process. He said there was only absence of Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar from the Heads of Government Summit, which was the retreat. The only thing that she missed was the retreat. And he ended by saying, I was involved in the discussion of all other heads of government on the reappointment of the Secretary General. We support the reappointment of the Secretary General, and there's nothing nothing more for me to clarify. So he's been very clear that as far as he is concerned, and those heads of government, some of whom did not attend the meeting, but they may have had their different reasons for not doing that, but for those who did attend, and he most pointedly said that all that was supposed to be done was done. And I mean, he may have used diplomatic language, but if the argument is one of process and process not being followed, he's saying the process was followed. And he ended by saying he supports the appointment of reappointment of Dr. Barnett. So then it gives you, and oh yes, and there's also a statement which says, which I think Dr. Drew said, I don't know if it came from Dr. Drew, but it included all member states received official correspondence and acknowledged receipt about the 50th meeting, including retreat details. This is what he said he did. Mm-hmm. So he is obviously contradicting very strongly the version, I have to say the version of Prime Minister Persad, that she was uninvited to the meeting. And I don't know if you want me to go ahead, because what I was about to go on to now is the question is why all of this? Why make all this why make all this confusion over something where Dr. Barnett apparently was I'm going to say popular, but certainly had majority support of CARICOM.
Yes.
Why would our Prime Minister feel it necessary, not only before the meeting, because I believe before the meeting, they had telegraphed to the national community that they did not support her reappointment, even before the meeting. At the meeting, you left early. Why did you leave early? And then you're saying you didn't, you left. Why? Why did you leave early? Why did your Minister of Foreign Affairs have nausea that he couldn't go to the meeting? Why couldn't he send someone to represent you? I mean, and then you have Dr. Ali saying, no, everything that was supposed to have been done was done. And then you have the chair of the meeting saying, yes, everyone was notified. So, you know, on a balance of the weight to which you want to put to what has been said, you know, it is unfortunate, but what do you do? I mean, look at the persons that have spoken out. And there's a lack of clarification from Prime Minister Prasad regarding her allegation, her statement that she was uninvited. And I also want to tell us what that means. Was she invited at some point in time? And if she was not, if she was invited, when was the invitation withdrawn and how was it withdrawn? I mean, she's very good at being clear when she wants to be. So be clear about that, because you're up against too many voices that are saying what you are saying is inaccurate. And you're using very strong language to justify your position. So I don't want to say that the Prime Minister was uninvited. I don't know if that's what the Prime Minister said. What I want the Prime Minister to do is to give a stronger response. And the proof, where was the notification or lack of notification? I mean, does she have a notification from other member states? And she no notification was sent to her. We need something more than just you saying that, given what we are seeing Dr. Drew saying and Dr. Ali.
I will say this though, there's one thing that Dr. Drew said happened, in that the wording is very specific but not very detailed, in that while on retreat under the agenda item on financing and governance, during the retreat under the agenda item financing and governance of the community, decide to consider the reappointment of the Secretary General. And I understand the claim that this was, here's the thing, I don't believe it has been directly said to my satisfaction by the chairman that it was plainly stated that the vote was directly stated on the agenda of the retreat. Because when I look at the statement that he has, there is an agenda item of financing and government, but the reappointment is not there. So I am still left in doubt. One of our local newspapers reported this. I tried to double check it, but there is no actual documentation, at least to my individual satisfaction. So take that, you know, make that of what you will of it. That the CARICOM chairman could say, yes, this was on the agenda for the retreat, and Trinidad and Tobago knew it. Now, I'm not saying that it wasn't the case. I'm just saying that a lot of his statements are, they told us, or they told the government the details of the meeting and the stuff, and they got all the correspondence. But I guess this is where we get into a kind of a gray zone, in the sense of the retreat was probably important enough anyway that we should have had representation anyway. But I just find it very weird that this vote, it's very difficult to kind of pin down, was it officially on the agenda, or did it just come up during the retreat under a general line item on the agenda that was kind of left open-ended? I'm not sure.
And Sean, that same point did occur to me, to be frank with you, because when I looked at the agenda and Dr. Drew was saying that it was put on the agenda for the retreat that they were going to consider the reappointment of the Secretary General for a second term, I found the language, first of all, the heading I found was very general, and then it talked about the operational issues. So that alone said, well, what is operational issues? That you need to be more specific. And I think Prime Minister Prasad said it was not clearly stated that at the retreat, a matter on the agenda was specifically the reappointment of the Secretary General. So I did note that, and it did bother me that, I mean, he's, I didn't read the document itself, so I'm putting that out there. But on the report, it did, I did question, well, that's not very clear. I mean, that is just saying something very general. That is not addressing the issue, which I know, as far as Trinidad and Tobago was concerned, which I will go into soon, why they were so opposed, as far as I can see, to her being reappointed. But what stopped me in my tracks is three things. Why would you leave early? You didn't want to go to the retreat. You left. I mean, those are the facts. Why did you leave on the 25th? And you knew the retreat. You knew the retreat was on the 26th. You knew that. Why did you leave on the 25th? And by the way, the other sessions were plenary sessions, which were open to other persons other than the heads of government. The retreat was a heads of government retreat only, which only signaled to you the importance of that retreat. I think it would be naive of us to say, go ahead.
That point is also, I don't understand it. Why is it that people who are basically criticizing our government stance, and again, this is not to defend the government, I'm just confused. It's labeled as a heads of government only retreat, but I mean, even on the agenda, I believe it says in bold, heads of government only. And yet, there's this big issue being made about the Minister of Foreign Affairs not attending. So I'm left kind of confused as to what this was all supposed to be. I don't know if you could clear it up for me, because...
Well, remember we had the OAS meeting and our Prime Minister didn't attend, so he had the... Well, let me not go down that route.
You see, like, I understand that you can't not send someone to a high-level thing like this, and a retreat of heads of government is high level. It's just that when they label it heads of government only, as a layman, I am left very confused, and I guess it goes back to my complaint that I had yesterday. I just don't know why people are not making this whole situation clearer when they throw out their statements. It seems as though everybody is talking around details and not just spelling out in layman's terms what the details are.
Well, because the issue really is, to me, when you clearly fluff and, it's clear to look at go to the number of the issue, did our Prime Minister not want to attend the meeting, and why not?
Well, yes.
And that's the bottom line. And so all of this is just adding to the equation. So it doesn't help. It does not help that you say heads of government only, which on one side you can say, well, if you know it's heads of government only, you know how important it is. Right. And it'd be very difficult for me to believe that you didn't have an indication before, because of the nature of the retreat, what was on the agenda, even if it wasn't spelled out on the document. So it'd be difficult and is it officially, what's officially? Officially is in paper, officially is a call from another Minister of Foreign Affairs, CARICOM Minister of Foreign Affairs. So I don't know how that was transmitted to her. And that is a point. But also, when I was doing the reading, it was said at one point, no, I don't know quite who said it, maybe I think it's something from the Secretary General's office, said, well, if you can't come to the meeting, we quite understand, it's okay. And then you had, as far as I can recollect, it's saying, well, other heads of government, and that is how you can easily check that, if other heads of government sent representatives to represent them at the meeting, because if they did, then it's not correct to say that it could only have been the Prime Minister, that someone else. And if all you have to get is the attendance sheet, and if the attendance sheet for a certain country shows that a head of government was not there, but he or she was represented by someone, then it goes to the argument that it's not only, it's only if she got sick. Suppose our Prime Minister had gotten sick, what are you going to do? They can't attend. You send someone high level enough who can represent you at the meeting. And if that is shown that that happened with other heads of government, then out goes that argument. And it's easy to settle that if either party wants to. But until that is settled, if you have a heads of government retreat only, you have to know it's very high level, which means your attendance is obviously, there must be some very good reason why you have to run back to Trinidad. If you can't attend, stay a few hours in St. Kitts. It's quite, you have to question that. I mean, I was in government, yes, at one time, and I did go to these meetings at one time, and I find it difficult to believe that you wouldn't have any idea. I don't know if they had any idea, but it's difficult to believe that. And then leaving so quickly just before the retreat. Then as soon as you leave, 20 minutes later, your Minister of Foreign Affairs, according to the record, says, I get nauseous and I get seasickness and all of that. So maybe he was the one that should have gone in her place. Maybe maybe when you go and check the record, when the head of government doesn't attend, maybe the Minister of Foreign Affairs is the person who sits in his or her place. Maybe that is, I do not know. But what I do know is that our Prime Minister left on the day before, the 25th, the night of the 25th, and at least what the records show, and then maybe about 20 minutes later, her foreign minister said he couldn't go either because he has seasickness. So is it that he could have attended in her place? Is that the norm? Is that the practice? I do not know. But and it's easy to find that out and end that whole story. You bring an end to that. You bring an end to that. But what does not look good? What does not look good is that you are, I will accept that perhaps the retreat only said the venue, the place, and the time, and who was to attend. I will accept that maybe it did not specifically, I say that we're going to, on the agenda item was the reappointment of Dr. Carl Barnett, although that was something I believe we were talking about in Trinidad even before the meeting, so we were very well aware that it was going to be going to be raised. And if you are a member of the Foreign Affairs Ministry, I find it very difficult to believe that you don't know what the retreat would consider. I mean, it just doesn't, it's not ringing right. And then you have to leave on the night, and then your minister 20 or a few minutes later calls to say he can't come. And then next thing you come out and say that you're uninvited. What does that mean? It just does not sit well. So I agree with what you said, Sean, that when Dr. Drew responded as if to say, well, Prime Minister Prasad knew that that was what was going to be considered. If what we have read as being on the agenda from the retreat, it does not clarify that, and it does not specify that. But having said so, did other countries, did other heads of government send their foreign ministers there? Why did our foreign minister suddenly 20 minutes after, according to the notes, come and say he has seasickness? We're going to play now. I went on a plane to St. Kitts and Nevis, It's just not making sense.
Well,
but go ahead.
There's also the fact that it seems as though, yes, our Prime Minister went, said what she had to say. Some of the heads of government in the front row, at least in one shot during her speech, were not well receptive to the things that she had to say. And then she left early. And now during this whole situation, I wonder if it is, I guess it is questionable. Not saying that's wrong or right. There seems as though our government is not willing to engage except under the terms that they've set out with regards to resolving this dispute, apparently. Because I do believe the chairman has basically, they had talks recently over the reappointment issue, and apparently with regards to those recent talks that were supposed to be held, our government, as far as I'm aware, did not show up. I'm willing to be corrected if I am misunderstanding this, but it seems as though we are not necessarily willing to engage with CARICOM on the matter, on the terms that CARICOM is saying, hey, look, okay, let's meet and talk about it in this manner. And it seems like our government is saying, we don't want to do that. And it's just one of those things where from my vantage point, Karen, it almost looks as though there's so many just different things, whether intentional or unintentional, across the board with this whole issue, that is just seemingly kind of pulling the situation apart as opposed to bringing it together. Because again, with what Ralph Gonzalez is saying, and he's kind of inciting the flames of the whole situation and he's no longer at a state. I just get the sense as though it's our government has its part to play in not necessarily looking to get a resolution that is sooner rather than later. But I also question if there are necessarily other agendas that I don't know of from other parties on the other side. However, that, I guess you would say, is secondary to the matter of hand, which is why is the reappointment of Dr. Barnett such a big deal, and potentially it does tie into wider issues with regard to the region.
And you know something? History is a great thing, because when you have the opportunity for history, you look back and you see the dots connecting. So what seems to be fragmented, disconnected decisions are all connected. And to me, and as I said already, I am not disagreeing. I am not here to say that Prime Minister Prasad is right or wrong to align ourselves with the United States. We are in their sphere of influence. Certainly, they have a tremendous amount of power to date, and we are a small player in a very big pond. So I am not here to critique whether her decision-making is right or wrong, if that is a consideration. But if we connect the dots, I think the uninvited issue, and I want to raise the issue of consensus, because I think that was a good point that was made from a legal standpoint, and I understand they are going to raise it. But let me just say, it's just a continuation of what I see as our government in CARICOM playing a role of fragmentation, playing a role of disruption, which the CARICOM leaders have seen that. Now, I know that's not the first time when Prime Minister Prasad was Prime Minister the first occasion, she famously or infamously said, Trinidad and Tobago is not an ATM machine. So she set the tone from then. The rationale for that would have been a different rationale. I think a rationale this time around, and if you look at when history plays out itself and you start to connect all the dots together, there's something that is going to connect all these things. There's a connecting tissue. And that is, we see Trinidad and Tobago, because of its geopolitical importance, next to Venezuela, next to Guyana, oil and gas economy, the importance of dragon feed to us, and a number of things. We see, and America sees us as playing an important role. And in that regard, there are a number of things the Prime Minister has done that has signaled that. And this is just a continuation. Number one, with the zone of peace argument. When from my understanding, when I haven't done the history of the zone of peace, where it came about, but it clearly was a regional decision, which Trinidad and Tobago, among other CARICOM countries, agreed to, which was to give the region regional security, because we are small fish, we're very vulnerable. And at that time, in the 1970s, there was a lot of conflict, global conflict, and we obviously could have been a casualty of it, as we could have been with Venezuela, as we all were concerned. Whether or not it came to pass, we were concerned about it. And the whole idea behind the zone of peace was to respect the territorial integrity and independence of sovereign states, and to settle matters through diplomacy rather than military intervention, which is what America was threatening Venezuela with over the weeks leading up to the actual, taking out of Maduro, which I am not going to comment on, except to say she was very, very strong and on her position, which was very anti-CARICOM, and which I do not think that the CARICOM members took lightly to the position that she adopted. What she said, as I understood it, is the cartels, the domestic crime in Trinidad and Tobago. I think she quoted 620-something murders in 2024. I think she said that at the St. Kitts meeting. In any event, to using the level of crime, which is very high, and murder, which is very high in our country, as justification for the America, as the United Nations, and many have said, not respecting the international rule of law. She has used very, very strong language. I think the newspaper in Jamaica took her to task for that, saying, you know, like something about using the gun, the Uzi, and anyway, very, very, very strong language in support of America, which was America's intention to go into Venezuela and setting the stage. I think she was setting the stage because the zone of peace was never intended for domestic purposes. Every country used impact. It's very, very effective. Interpol, there are a lot of international criminal agencies which have the Americans are part of, which could assist us in fighting a crime in our country, the drug trade, which I have 100% support that, because I do know that we do need external assistance. But the way in which the Prime Minister came out and how she was seen by the CARICOM members and her language was very, 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 the word escapes me now, but it was fighting words, that it was seen as though going beyond what was necessary. So that was the beginning. Then our Prime Minister was not only attended, but was invited, I think, to the Shield of the Americas, something like that, in Doral, Florida.
Yes.
And was welcomed there by Marco Rubio and so on. And America was going back to the days, as people saw it, as going back to the days of the sphere of influence, to the United States backyard, we being the United States backyard, and using as the justification providing maritime regional security by having their Navy and their maritime facilities patrolling our waters. And she was very pleased to attend that meeting. And she not only was, as I said, attended, but she was invited and spoke out very much in favor of it. So you see the zone of peace, that's a very American position. She's seen the Shield of America, that recent meeting which President Trump attended. And then what I found was very curious, but you know what? If you have done history and done international relations, maybe, I'm just saying, I don't know, maybe that may have been an influence or just my cynical nature. When he spoke when our Prime Minister spoke at the conference in February, the Heads of Government Summit, I went back and looked at it. And she then talked about the cartels, and the cartels are destroying the country. But yes, they are destroying the country, but is destroying the zone of peace something that the CARICOM region takes so much pride in? And, you know, and as a region are so vulnerable, is that the way to go to say the zone of peace is not a zone of peace? I mean, why are you doing something like that? You know, why don't you look for a solution? But in any event, when the Prime Minister spoke in St. Kitts, soon after, immediately I went back to look at this speech, because it did strike me. She segued immediately from the cartels to Cuba and talked about, and she said about Cuba.
Well,
that
we have the clip.
Yes,
I don't
you
know.
have it, okay, good.
Yeah, so let's play. This is what the Prime Minister, her remarks. She hit on a lot of topics like immigration and crime, and then towards the end, she spoke to Cuba.
Right. Okay.
Global focus on Cuba, right here at our CARICOM. Let me remind me and us, every single leader in this room was elected by a free and fair democratic election. Everyone in our countries. And so I ask, why do some CARICOM governments and political parties believe that they and their parties and their supporters should have the right to contest democratic elections to choose them as leaders, where the Cuban citizens have no right to a free and fair election? And whilst I talk with you, Prime Minister Holness, I empathize with the people, the good people of Cuba, but there's a regime that's a dictatorial one, and none of us want that in our country, not one of us. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here today. We were all elected by free and fair elections. And so we cannot advocate for others to live under communism and dictatorship, but we want to live here in our CARICOM region under democracy and capitalism. That's an oxymoron, it's a contradiction. For ourselves, we want free democracy, but tell the Cuban people, okay, we feel sorry for you. It can't work. And as you said, Prime Minister Holness, we have to find a mechanism for the humanitarian efforts of the people of Cuba, but at the same time, we cannot, and I will not, Trinidad and Tobago will not support a dictatorship in Cuba or anywhere else. We will not support it. What we do, we support regular, free and fair democratic elections in a multi-party system. All citizens must have equality before the law. There must be the rule of law. There must be majority rule and minority rights. We must have the separation of powers and the checks and balances. We must have accountability and transparency. We must have freedom of expression and association. And for us in Trinidad and Tobago, we must have capitalism. We will not support dictatorships.
So that is a very traditional democracy versus communism rhetoric. And I guess to me, it was more the tone of the statements. We kind of knew that Cuba was on the US radar with regards to, I believe it's Rubio. But the tone of the statements coming from our Prime Minister, I will admit, the subject matter wasn't totally surprising, but how she did it, it seemed as though it might have, to me, even preempted potentially the United States in some ways with regards to any sort of official, statement to the other countries of the region on the matter. And while I understand where she's coming from, it puts the whole situation with the Secretary General and potentially another issue that CARICOM might have disagreements over in a whole new light, I guess you could say, because it seems as though her speech was about pushing back against the different ideologies or the different beliefs that other heads of government has, and just about on every issue, I guess you could say.
But you know what I looked at it as? When I saw that, you're saying it wasn't strange, but I did find it was a little strange. Okay, why Cuba? And why all that long conversation about Cuba? Guess why? Because America is going into Cuba. That's what they said. And Marco Rubio, whatever his reasons are, he does feel very strongly about Cuba. And guess what? Guess what's an important state in the national elections in America? I'm sure you remember that with the Democrats when they lost the elections of their president. I can't remember. Gore was allegedly supposed to be the president of the United States based on the election results, and I think Florida changed the whole dynamics. So it's not only important on an international basis and part of America's keep America, and I'm not against America wanting to do that, I'm just talking about our involvement, and I am trying to analyze why our Prime Minister has been the zone of peace, the shield of Americas, the position she has taken, the last one, how strong she has been on the issue regarding the reappointment of Carla Barnett, because Carla Barnett does not only is the mouthpiece for CARICOM in relation to Cuba, but it seems that she personally feels very strongly about it. I think in December 2024, when she gave a speech in Havana, Cuba, she highlighted the relationship, which she said was an exemplary model of South-South cooperation and mutual respect, independence, and sovereignty, and a position which CARICOM does have in relation to Cuba, which United Nations also has. In July, I think 2024, the heads of government of CARICOM focused on the concern of humanitarian concerns, deteriorating humanitarian concerns, the situation in Cuba resulting from the embargo imposed for 62 years by the United States government. They talk about state terrorism and have asked the government to remove them from that list because according to them, there's no justification for them to continue to be on that list. And that is actually the same position that the United Nations Secretary General has taken, but that's United Nations. That's a lot of countries, which said they've given strong support and extreme concern over potential humanitarian crisis in Cuba, driven by severe fuel shortages and United States embargo, and has called for respect for international law. But what we're seeing is that our Dr. Barnett, as the mouthpiece or the spokesperson for CARICOM, on his position on Cuba in 2024, gave a very strongly worded and powerful and passionate speech supporting Cuba. And it is my consideration, I'm subject to being corrected on it, but there's a trend, there's a continuous trend here that, and when I saw the thing with Cuba, I said, you know what, something's going to happen with Cuba. She's talking about Cuba, that something's going to happen with Cuba. That's starting the discourse and putting out there CARICOM's position regarding Cuba, which is contrary to CARICOM's position with regard to Cuba. Absolutely. You know, it has respect for its independence. It talks about humanitarian crisis and has blamed the United States to a large extent for the economic hardship in Cuba because of the embargo that had been imposed. And so has the United Nations. Then that's not just the CARICOM. And yet we have our Prime Minister speaking out and saying, yes, she feels compassion, which I'm sure America does too, for the humanitarian crisis, but spoke out very harshly and very strongly and condemned at a CARICOM meeting to which Cuba is not a member, and which I don't know that that was an OAS meeting or CELAC meeting or meeting where that would have been on the agenda, spoke about it. And we learned very recently that according to what I've read or understood, is that the next place that Trump intends to go is from Iran. He intends to go to Cuba. So there just seems to be, there just seems to be a course of conduct, and that what the Prime Minister does, is clearly a cheerleader. She's not just being supportive. And by the way, when she has done this, I had the note somewhere, but apparently when she spoke out against Cuba, it caused a great deal of dissent and anger among CARICOM members. I wrote it down somewhere. Well, what is that going to do? Divide and rule. One of the things you want to do is, if you have the CARICOM region and even before that, spoke out against CARICOM. Remember when she said, was he going to CARICOM? What's CARICOM doing first? And then you had Brown from St. Kitts, who was kept decidedly quiet recently. He must have his reason. Said, what do you mean that Trinidad is not benefiting from CARICOM? Trinidad gets is $34.5 million US, the beneficiary of trade in CARICOM. How could you say that Trinidad and CARICOM means nothing? So it's just as though there is, it's just, listen, I am looking at it probably, and maybe not correctly, but I'm looking at it maybe from a distant position, and history has a way of teaching you these lessons, and you see a course of conduct, break up CARICOM, because that's what you're doing. The zone of peace, you're breaking up with that. Cuba, you're breaking up with that. Going after CARICOM and say CARICOM is a waste of time. All Trinidad has been, insofar as CARICOM has been disruptive. All Trinidad has been, and that is not the history of Trinidad. It has not been our history. We have been one of the major movers for the CARICOM integration movement, and we have a Prime Minister who, from the get-go, all based on the response of the members of the CARICOM leaders, they are not happy with what our Prime Minister is doing. And it is being very disruptive, and it is causing division among our community, which the strength of anybody, whether it's the European Union, United States of America, all of these countries, is strength and unity. And what seems to be, at least is the outcome of what is happening, is that you're getting disruption, fracturing, which cannot ever be good for CARICOM. And the positions that have been taken, surely and slowly, there have been positions which have been aligned with the United States. Now, if we are benefiting from it, well, it seems that we may be, and maybe that is what is motivating the Prime Minister. The one thing I want to raise before we, in all fairness to the Prime Minister too, I don't know, when I was reading the AI, I'm sure everybody read the AI like me, they talked about the reasons why the Prime Minister was against the meeting, the retreat. And she talked about the minutes not being circulated, what is the curriculum vitae, what is the qualifications. But what was not raised there, and what I think is a critical point, was the issue of the consensus.
Well,
But if it
Karen,
was raised,
I need you to hold on
go ahead.
because we have a Rima on the line. So we'll take the call and then we'll come back to this point because this is where it takes another left turn. But a Rima on the line caller, good morning. You on here?
Morning, Sean. Morning to you, Mr. Nunes Teixeira.
Morning.
Morning.
No, I have a question for Ms. Nunes Teixeira. I'd asked her to ask her, but I think you forget. How is it that the government could spend $25 billion plus to build out Clico, right? But they can't forgive the breakfast, shed the debts, and clear it up and start it over. That's what I would like her to answer for me. And in relation to this situation here with CARICOM, the Prime Minister is picking a fight. If you're not seeing it that way, well, then something wrong. She's picking a fight with CARICOM on behalf of the United States. Because if you go back in time a little bit, remember the Petro-Caribbean deals that it had?
Yeah.
Trinidad and Tobago, Venezuela, end up supplying gas to the Caribbean. And we were their suppliers. We got left out in part of that deal. So we had to look at it from quite back then. So now that the United States is against Venezuela, well, was against Venezuela, and she was on the United States side, the rest of the Caribbean is seen as being pro-left wing, which may or may not necessarily be true, but I think the Caribbean leaders are more human in their disposition than our Prime Minister. And Sean Michaels, well, I'll leave you with this one. They say the state of emergency is not a crime-fighting tool, right?
The minister said that.
Well, how come when the state of emergency done, all prevented, all PDOs, null and void? So the persons who the politicians feel should be locked up, get locked up, which is really a function of the courts to provide a warrant. Have a good day. Listen, good program as usual.
Thanks, caller. That last one, I'll just say quick. We've seen PDOs for police officers that allegedly are corrupt. So I'm not so inclined to just assume that is the case. I mean, I don't know if they're gangsters that the politicians want to target for some sort of personal agenda, but I don't think we have enough to go down those considerations. All right, I apologize, Karen. We have Faizabad, but we do need to get to Karen's point after this call because she has a big point to make. But Faizabad, first caller, good morning, on here.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Karen. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
Morning.
The issue with the Prime Minister and the summit, Karen, you can correct me as I go along. As I saw it, when they were doing firstly, she wrote to the CARICOM Secretariat with respect to the Ben Thomas issue. She was not responded to. I think she was in opposition then.
Yes.
Then she went to the summit, and then when they would have introduced all the newly elected Prime Minister, she was accidentally or willfully omitted from the page. Do you remember that?
Omitted from?
Hello?
What was she omitted from, caller?
When they were introducing the newly elected Prime Minister of one election recently.
Right.
She called all the other names except the Honorable Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. Yes?
I remember that.
And
I can't remember the details of that, of what happened there. But yes,
And
I remember
so-
something like that happened.
Yes, it did happen, and I don't know if I am a nation's leader, and as very important as they are suggesting I'm supposed to be, I would feel embarrassed. I would feel slighted, especially if it was deliberately done. So that in itself tells you there was some bad blood. I understand this. They're supposed to have this term doesn't come to end until August. And I understand there's that next meeting of heads somewhere in July. Yes? So to do this thing in a very secretive way, as I would have seen it, or I want to think, it should raise some concerns with the information I have. And I'm not seeing anything definite coming from Mr. Drew and company with respect to the Prime Minister and her request. And so, with respect to Cuba, I mean, she would have made a statement and she kept referring to Honorable Holness, which means there was some discussion with respect to Cuba. But we must remember Haiti is a part of CARICOM, and Haiti is in turmoil. Haiti is in turmoil. Venezuela, who was just liberated, as some of the Venezuelans would say, and I am not seeing any real difficulty with Venezuela now. As a matter of fact, a lot of them are very happy with the level of democracy they are now experiencing. Yes? So I think, we need to revisit this thing carefully and not make loose statements. Take care, my.
Thank you, caller. Well, Karen, I'll let you go with regards to the issue of consensus, but with regards to Prime Minister's on the reappointment, but with regards to Prime Minister Holness's or the references that our Prime Minister had to the Jamaican Prime Minister, the thing is, if you watch the whole speech, the context is that she was referring to his words that he made in his speech previously. So there's nothing to suggest.
What end? To what end, though?
No, but the caller is saying she referred to PM Holness, so he is inferring that there was some sort of discussions between her and the Jamaican Prime Minister on the issue, and I'm saying no, she was referring to parts of his speech made that evening previously. There's nothing to suggest that there was any meeting on the Cuban issue, because she referred to Prime Minister Holman's statements on more than one occasion over multiple issues. Right? So
but,
I just want...
I hear what you're saying. I did see the speech, and yes, she did refer to it, but not as if they had discussion, but you just as though we are in agreement, because what you said is in agreement with an accord, well, my views, but I didn't get from it that they had met, but she certainly wanted to create to the person listening that there was agreement, or there was symmetry.
I think she was trying to find a way to show that, yes, look, my views agrees with your views,
yes,
even
that's
though
what she was
there is a divide. But
that's what she was doing. And I think go ahead.
No, you were going to bring up the point about the requirement of a consensus for this procedure.
Yeah, but I want to just go back a little bit, because what we really tried to do, and the person brought up the Brent Thomas, when the Prime Minister embraced the Brent Thomas as the zone of peace, I did the same thing. What I think her point was that the Secretariat of the CARICOM was inefficient. I can't remember exactly how they were inefficient in dealing with the Brent Thomas issue, and so it was only playing into the idea that the CARICOM is really not as effective as we like it to be. So, so I think when Brown told her, well, you all are Trinidad is benefiting from the CARICOM trade agreement, then she referenced the Brent Thomas issue to show, as I understood it, the inadequacies or the inefficiencies of CARICOM to deal with Brent Thomas, as I recall. All of this, and then coming back, just before I go to consensus, all of this is Petro-Caribe. The Petro-Caribe, you could look at it in one way, that Petro-Caribe, of course, Venezuela, as far as I could see, was trying to create their own sphere of influence within the Caribbean and Latin America region by offering their oil at significantly discounted prices at really good, very positive rates to a lot of our Eastern Caribbean countries, particularly Ralph Gonzalez. Ralph St. Vincent is one of the major beneficiaries of Petro-Caribe. But to respond, when I had come into office, I remember, because that was the time of where Prime Minister Manning at the time, who was a great believer in CARICOM, was concerned that what the Petro-Caribe was going to do was fracture CARICOM, because the CARICOM members would turn to Venezuela, and the whole idea of CARICOM would have been impacted. So he had the Petroleum Fund. And in fact, it's that same Ralph Gonzalez who seems to be a great fan, if I were to follow what he has been saying, in the past, and who was very influential in getting the OFAC to reconsider its position with Trinidad having access to the natural gas from Venezuela and paying in cash rather than kind. It is he, because I know that as a fact, that I know as a fact, because I was in government at the time, that, or close to anyhow, coming into government, that I think it was 100 million US, the first set of money that St. Vincent got to build its new airport in Argyle, because before that, you couldn't land a commercial plane there, so their tourism was badly affected. And the first 100 million US, they got it out of the petroleum fund, which Trinidad and Tobago set up, and other countries that supported us or did not go to Petro-Caribbean, I think was, if I'm not incorrect, I believe it was Barbados and another country. So all I'm saying with the Brent Thomas, which someone has brought up, the Petro-Caribbean, which was also brought up, I would say to that, what I would say to that is that this Prime Minister, for reasons that are different from what applied when she was first Prime Minister, sees her role as being a cheerleader of what America wants. What America wants is what would benefit Trinidad and Tobago. She may have a personal feeling about it, that might be a personal view, but from the country's point of view, she sees that America is a winner still, a global winner still, and in this part of the world, and it is in the interest of Trinidad and Tobago to align itself with that. So all the things that you are seeing, and all the criticism of CARICOM in this rounds, not the first rounds, but this round, the Zone of Peace rounds, the Summit of America's rounds, the Brett Thomas round, the Carla Barnett round, all of that is a position that is supportive of United States position, and it's coming from a leader, a powerful leader in the CARICOM region, which is Trinidad and Tobago. That is what I would say in relation to that. Now, coming back to the issue that the consensus, I do think there was a good point. The point that apparently that Trinidad and Tobago, I don't know if they are going to follow it, but indicated that they were going to. Trinidad and Tobago is saying that Article 27 of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas requires consensus. Consensus means, now they use the word all participating, the word is participating, so that's another issue. So all participating member states must agree to the decision. In the absence of all that, of the defined consensus, the decision cannot be made. So if Trinidad and Tobago did not support the reappointment of Dr. Barnett, then it does raise the issue whether her appointment is valid. That is what Trinidad is saying. Dr. Drew, on behalf of the chair of CARICOM, is saying Article 24 of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas says all he requires is a requisite majority, and that the requisite majority was obtained at the treaty meeting. Trinidad is saying, no, you need all heads of government to agree to it. Without their agreement, all heads of government, you do not have consensus, and therefore you do not have agreement. So that is a good point. Where it will go, and legally I cannot say, but there definitely is an argument about required majority being adequate, or is consensus required. And the argument I think that Trinidad and Tobago is making is that CARICOM is a consensus-based organization. It operates on consensus. That is how it comes to decisions. It is consensus-based, according to their argument. And therefore, it stands to reason such an important reappointment of your Secretary General to CARICOM requires similarly consensus and not require majority. The only fly in the ointment to that argument is Dr. Irfan Ali, who subsequent to all of this, subsequent to all the argument about consensus, because that was raised before, he has taken the position that he agrees to the reappointment, and he says the process was followed. So Trinidad does not have, I don't know who is on their side, I don't know if you need consensus in the legal argument, but that is an argument that Trinidad and Tobago has indicated, and it's called for an emergency meeting of CARICOM when they return to Trinidad, and that as far as my understanding is the legal issue that they intend to pursue, that even if you invite or uninvited, was there consensus, and they're saying there was not, and therefore the appointment was valid. And what is all this about? And this is what I'm hopefully trying to telegraph. I am not saying that we could change the price of sugar. We can't. We're a small player. We can't. But what we are trying to do, how I read it, how I see it, is that we are saying, America, look at Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Trump, Marco Rubio, you look at, you have a friend in us. You have a friend in us. And we are going to go out there publicly and support America's position. Whether we are successful or not, we have made that commitment to do that. And in doing that, part of, as I see it, is disruption of the functioning of CARICOM, because definitely CARICOM is fractured right now. It is not functioning as it should, and definitely whether or not Dr. Barnett's appointment stays or not, I cannot say. But what I do know is Trinidad and Tobago has taken the position that they're going to challenge it. Who is going to be happy about that? United States. What Trinidad has done, we do not say we are zone of peace. We agreed to the 1970s with all the CARICOM countries, we agreed. Now we're saying we are not a zone of peace. In face of all your CARICOM members who are saying that. Why? That was imminent to America's intervention into Venezuela. As is Carla Barnett's position and CARICOM position, it was just before America has indicated that it is, Marco Rubio has indicated that they will be going into Cuba. So all I am saying, to close off my contribution, I am not at all saying that what the Prime Minister of our country is doing is meeting with success in CARICOM. It's meeting with success with America. And that is who, in my respectful opinion, that is who the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago is most concerned about. That what we are doing as a country is supporting America, and is supporting America publicly, vociferously, in all its interventions and its policies, insofar as this part of this neck of the world is concerned. And the Prime Minister has been consistent with that, has not backed down from that, and for some may say it is to our benefit.
And one of the things with regards to this is, whatever the deeper politics are, it seems as though nobody really wants to say it, right? In fact, Prime Minister Gaston Brown, Antigua and Barbuda, one of the countries that were not present, or at least was said to not be present, he wants to say nothing about it at all. I will say this, and you brought up the point that the Prime Minister in a previous term said we are not CARICOM's ATM or something to that effect. I also do think that there is some incentive with regards to reducing the money that we spend on CARICOM. Given what we've seen with some of the other fiscal plans or taxation or fees or fines or what have you, although not necessarily that is the main motivating factor of whatever is going on. And I feel as though there's a lot that is not said on both sides of the equation. It's very telling that you don't actually hear too much from the other heads of state. Again, the former Prime Minister, St. Vincent and Grenadines, he seemingly has an axe to grind. I don't necessarily agree with him doing what he's doing. And I could say that because I disagreed with what was done to him in a similar manner. But with regards to this topic, we have some comments to get through, and so I'll also give me a chance to give my 2 cents on. Let's take some of the comments first. The question is whether Dr. Barnett is authorized to address the request of an opposition in any CARICOM country, in this case of Mrs. Basabi Sessa, who was leader of the opposition at the time of the Brent Thomas issue. Well, I'll say this though, the trick with this specific issue is she's now Prime Minister. So that kind of is a moot point in a way, because it's not as though she was drumming the war drums as opposition leader all the time, right, during that situation. Now, the other thing is this. And procedurally, is it correct for an opposition to seek out some sort of information or make a request of CARICOM? That is a fair question. That is juxtaposed or contrasted with the actual general duty that an opposition has to be a check and balance and to seek the truth of any potential government misbehavior, right? And I'm not...
Can I just say this, Sean?
Yes.
Sean, can I just say this, please? As far as I can see, the reason why the Prime Minister raised the Brent Thomas issue is just one of the many reasons why CARICOM is a waste of time, as far as she's concerned.
Right.
So the Brent Thomas issue is not an issue that we are dealing with in Trinidad and Tobago, the kidnapping. Although she did raise that, and she was right. She said the judge said it was a kidnapping. If you listen to what was said, a lot of the time that was spent was how inefficient CARICOM Secretariat was in responding to requests. And that is what you have to think, like, put yourself in her position. And what is her objective? Her objective is to nullify, neutralize, minimize the importance of CARICOM. And that's just not one other way of doing that. That's how I read it.
My thing is, I do think this whole situation, there seems to be a certain tone or a certain flavor of regional politics, which is not too dissimilar to national politics. That said, I'm not saying CARICOM is the members of CARICOM, like the Secretary General, are directly involved in anything like that. But when you see the lines of the various heads of government, of how we perceive them to be drawn, I also do wonder if her pressing the issue is also pushing back against whatever the regional politics with regards to who's allied to who, right? It's an indirect thing. I don't necessarily think that CARICOM is the biggest perpetrator of this whole thing, and I do feel, yes, there's some degree of her having an issue with CARICOM. That's why she's pressing the matter at hand, whereas the perpetrators on the issue are, I would say the responsibility falls more on others before it falls on the Secretary General. Yes, I understand that is the source of the plane. We do have another, a couple more comments. What is a retreat? Is it a formal planning session or an informal cocktail party? If the formal. Now, here's the case. Even if it is an informal...
I'm going to look it up, in truth. I'm going to look it up.
Well, here's the thing. First of all, I think it could mean different things to different people. Because whenever I have been in an organizational retreat, it was not an informal cocktail party, right? That's point number one. Now, I don't know if the TSTT thing was a retreat that made the news a couple of weeks ago. But here's the thing, and I think, Karen, we spoke about this off air, and you made a good point. Even informal situations, unless it is explicitly said this is not a venue to conduct business, even informal situations are situations where some degree of business will be conducted. It's just the tone, it's just the formalities will be subdued, and the approach will be more informal and casual, but it doesn't mean that it's any less serious. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, not only that, I think you want to have more focused approach to something. So a retreat is a smaller group, and in this retreat that we just spoke about, remember, you did make the point, the heads of government only. So you got an indication, listen, we want to be able to talk freely, we want to be able to talk more openly,
yes, freely.
One head of government to the other, and so there's a less formality, but not less important. So you're retreating, you're pulling back from the larger crowd to identify, focus on more narrow, but it's not a cocktail party.
I just want to say to the commenter, I am not saying the question is a bad question. I think the question is an important question, because I myself had to work it out for myself. I didn't start off, with that opinion. I actually was like, exactly what did it mean by retreat? I don't know, right? Yeah. And I guess that's part of it. And I guess since it had an agenda that included things like governance on it, overall topics like financial governance or what have you, right? There was some degree of formality behind it. We have another comment. Our Prime Minister denounced Venezuela. Didn't our Prime Minister denounce Venezuela even more so than she now denounced Cuba, yet she's sending a diplomatic mission to Venezuela. What has changed is that America now has good relations with Venezuela. She is openly showing she's America's proxy in the region. I can't disagree with that. I'll say this. She did say,
she was happy.
She did say during the whole situation where America was posturing before they took Maduro, we support the people of Venezuela. Our relations with Venezuela is good.
That is true.
This is all the while Venezuelan leaders are insulting her directly and personally, right, on their media channels. She keeps saying our relations with Venezuela is fine. Now, when the dust settled and Maduro was arrested and taken by the Americans, the vice president, now interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, she seemingly did not have warm and fuzzy feelings for Trinidad and Tobago and our Prime Minister Kamal Bissau, right? And there was a lot of questions. Our Prime Minister is still persona non grata. So, yes, we are attempting to engage with Venezuela diplomatically, but I just say that to say these things could change on the drop of a hat. Look, the CARICOM General Secretary last year said relations with Trinidad and Tobago is fine. And now look at the situation we're in. These things, the statements of who has diplomatic relations and who is denouncing, it's not permanent. So with regards to Cuba, you can't help but think, yes, this is the current, whether it's a formal agenda or whether this is what she perceives she has to say, or whether she's just wanting to say to America, look, I am a champion of democracy like you, continue to be my friend. It is hard not to think on some level it is meant in order to cement our relationship with the U.S. We have San Fernando on the line.
Can I just say this to Sean? She's being consistent. She said Cuba, she supports the Cuban people. It's not the Cuban people she's fighting.
But
it's the Cuban government.
She also said that she supports transparency and accountability. And the first word, at the very least, on some level, it's hard to say that our society is known for its transparency, regardless of who's in government. We have San Fernando line. Caller, good morning. You're on here.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Karen.
Morning.
Morning.
I have to agree with Karen, and let me put it another way. The Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago has decided to be America's disruptor in CARICOM. It is as one Prime Minister would say, it is pellucidly clear that she has decided that that is going to be her position. And trying to break up CARICOM, because America sees CARICOM as an independent organization, regional organization, which should be under their sphere of influence. And CARICOM is certainly not. It is independent. And that is a problem right now for the U.S. So Mrs. Bissau has decided that she is going to be with America. She's going to be the disruptor to try and disrupt CARICOM. I would like people to go back to the Chamber of Commerce conference, the Business Chamber conference, a couple of days ago, last week, where Mr. Franali, the Prime Minister and President of Guyana, gave a presentation. And if you listen to Mr. Ali's presentation, Mr. Ali was indirectly telling Trinidad and Tobago, we better together than apart. If you listen to his 1 hour presentation about things in Guyana and the benefits and all the different and the benefits in the region, Mr. Ali was saying indirectly, we are better together than apart. And I hope people would go and go back and look at Mr. Ali's 1 hour presentation in that conference last week. Have a good day, Sean, and have a good day, Karen. Bye.
Thank you, Cole. That is a point that I just wanted to make as well. I actually think whenever I listen to President Ali speak about CARICOM, one of the things I was always grateful for, right, my opinions on CARICOM's current state notwithstanding, the concept or the idea of CARICOM, I think, is sound and could offer us a lot. And the President of Guyana seemingly viewed CARICOM as something that was beneficial to him and was willing to, now that we have this new wealth, we will help support CARICOM continuing to develop. We will not just leave everybody behind. And Also, based on what he said with regards to the procedures followed for the reappointment, I am of the opinion that I believe the president of Guyana sees CARICOM or favors the existence of CARICOM, does not fully or might not fully agree with any agenda that will seek to try to disrupt or break up or hold back CARICOM. And my assumption is he is looking at the mistakes of his own neighbor and thinking, I need to think 10 steps into the future. The oil and gas will run out, right? And Guyana cannot just rely on mineral wealth forever. And CARICOM, again, is an instrument that can allow the various small island nations and small countries to come together in order to help support each other's economies to continue to grow in a way that if we were on our own, we just won't have the economies of scale to grow certain ways. It's not going to be easy, and seemingly now he is going to have an uphill battle. But while siding with the rest of CARICOM, he has continued to want to engage with Trinidad and Tobago. Very recently, of course, there's a whole meeting set up and what have you. So I think it's very interesting watching the Guyanese president navigating all of these separate agendas. Because let's not forget, it was his country that potentially was facing the threat of Venezuelan aggression. And I was very much, well, upset with regards to CARICOM's stance on that, not coming out strongly in defense of one of our members. So,
two things, Sean. I'm not saying it is that would have influenced him. Exxonmobil is American, largest American oil and gas company, and they have, I mean, when you look at what they have done to Ghana in terms of exploiting the oil and gas reserves, I think it has been, a lesson for Guyana, and not a good one either. And secondly, when the question of the elections, who won the elections, is the Caribbean Court of Justice who made that final decision. And Ghana has always been one of the countries that broke away, for want of a better word, from the Privy Council from very early days and agreed for our Caribbean Court of Justice to be our final court of appeal. So in many ways, Ghana has shown itself, although it's in the South American mainland, has shown itself to be really a member of CARICOM and seen the benefits to them to continue to be part of it. And I have to commend him for it, because I wish we could do more of that. He's not going against America, which he should not. He'd be foolhardy to do that. But at the same point in time, he's a man that you have to say on the face of it. I have to say on the face of it, because you never know what's going on behind the scenes. So I don't want to wake up and get egg on my face. But on the face of it, on other issues too that had come up earlier, he seems to be a man with conviction and principle up on the face of it. And he's shown that in an issue where people thought that he would have jumped on the side of Carmen Posada-Bissessar for a number of reasons, one of which is that America is their common ally.
All right, we have one last comment to go to before we close the show. It's based on the topic I was speaking to this morning. Good day. To explain the origins and history of Hamas, Hezbollah, and Hamas will show, well, I believe he means the RGC, will show that those three things are resistance groups and not terrorists, unlike Israel, where terrorism was used to establish their state, and have used terrorist acts throughout its history. In its recent genocide in Gaza, it is the latest act in a long history of terrorist acts. Today, people are seeing who the real terrorists are, and no statement from our government can hide the facts. First of all, let me just say off the jump, I disagree with what Israel did to Gaza, because in my opinion, there was no practical military benefit or security benefit in what regards they were doing. There was no military objective that they were accomplishing. That said, the origins of all three of those groups are not resistance groups, right? Or at least not simply or merely resistance groups. In the case of the RGC, it's definitely not resistance groups. First of all, with regards to Hamas, two wrongs don't make a right. Yes, I understand that Israel has killed disproportionately more people in their actions in Gaza, but the whole thing started off with atrocities committed by Hamas, atrocities reported by Al Jazeera. They have a whole video on it. I'm not going to get into it. Al Jazeera has fact-checked some of the claims that Israel made and has stated that some of the claims Israel made was false, But that doesn't mean that nothing bad happened. And that is just the latest situation with Hamas, right? So to say that they're merely a resistance group decided to attack civilians in order to resist what? Okay. Now, with regards to Hezbollah recently, Lebanon has decided to, I believe, ban Hezbollah activities, the Lebanese government. So Hezbollah is a resistant group defending something that Lebanon basically is saying, we don't want you to defend us. Let's not forget, Israel was formed after World War II, and the first war that they engaged in with its neighbors, of which Hezbollah participated in that first war, was an invasion of Israel. So I don't know where you're going to say Israel started off as a terrorist group. There were atrocities committed against Muslims and Christians by both sides from since, at the very least, the 1920s. I understand that. If you want to claim some great who is morally right and just at the origin point, I don't know if anybody could sort that out. But to say Israel was created as an act of terrorism by terrorists, I find that's very interesting given the fact that the first thing that happened in their nation's history was acts of aggression against them. It's not about whether it's right or wrong, it's just, it is, right? In fact, I would argue that's not terrorism, whichever way you slice it. That is just nation states going to war. Now, with regards to the IRGC, and this is also from Al Jazeera, right? After the revolution, Khomeini and his clerical brethren were fearful that the armed forces might stage a coup, so they created an alternative paramilitary group, the Revolutionary Guards. The Iranian experiment showed remarkable analogies with European experiences of totalitarian rule during the 20th century, where revolutionaries organized their own military forces to control the old power centers. And then they go into some less than savory comparisons that I don't necessarily want to make. And essentially, IRGC, yes, on some level, it is meant to deal with foreign influence within Iran. It's not necessarily an external security force. It's also meant to prop up the regime. It's also meant to thwart any military coups, as well as crushing any deviant movements. And there have been some videos coming out of Iran before the American and Israeli actions where there were internal dissent, right? To what degree do you want to say that was drummed up by foreign powers, or is it homogeneous and organic to their own citizens? I can't say. But to say that the IRGC is a resistant movement, well, it is an internal security apparatus, first and foremost. Iran had no actual direct on-the-ground issues or engagements with Israel because they're separated from distance. So the IRGC has actually nothing to do with regards to Israel in any capacity. So I just wanted to say that because I do find that people's opinions on this very complex issue, because at the very least, all three organizations are not the same. They have different origins, they operate and function differently, even within their own territories. Hamas is as much a political organization as it is a militant one. Hezbollah has no official standing with the state of Lebanon, and the IRGC is an arm of the state. But it answers to the clerics, not necessarily to the parliament, as far as I'm aware. So I just wanted to put that out there, right? Regardless, whether or not anything was done to them, whether or not any harm was done to their people, and whether or not their origins of a genuine, for genuine reasons, they haven't necessarily done nice things, like various other world powers, right? So I think one of the things we need to understand, terrorism is not like the most evil designation you could give. There are other evils in the world. But what I will say is that nation states conduct themselves differently. Not always better, not always worse, but they conduct themselves differently. It's technically not terrorism. Karen, I don't know, well.
My comment on that, and I'll leave it at that, it's complex.
Yes, yes.
That's what I'll say. And this time that we have certainly cannot do justice to the question that was put to you or the statement that was made. But you have dealt with it the best you can, and there will be difference of opinions. And as I say, it's a very complex issue.
Yeah, and also I think part of the problems is the situation is never static. It's always moving, right? Just like transnational crime, it's always moving. Even locally, the criminals are adjusting to some degree, they're adjusting to the state of emergency. That's why the murder rate, it's not necessarily grew, it's still lower, and it shrunk a little bit compared to this time last year, but the police are still concerned. To be fair, they brought up that they're concerned about the murder rate, right? It's not that the public is telling them we have these concerns, even during a state of emergency, and it's because, you know, human disagreement / conflict, it's always going to be dynamic, right? And wanting to kind of lump things in generalizations, that's a bit tricky and a bit risky. All right, so that's the show today, Karen. Thanks to the callers, thanks to the commenters. Karen, thanks for joining me. As always, interesting developments with regards to CARICOM. I do wonder if this is a sign that we might fracture. I don't know if maybe we just have to wait 5 years for fresh elections and new leaders might manage to fix things. I'm not sure.
Wait. Time will deal with all what we're dealing with, you know. I can assure you about that. So we don't know what's going to happen, but time will tell. I'm pretty certain about that.
All right, folks, this is Talking About the WESN. Just want to remind you to have a good day. As much as it is a weird thing to say, given all of what's happening around the world, still try and have a good day. Still do your best to make a good day, not just for yourself, but for the others that you meet. With that said, of course, it's nice to be nice, stay safe. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. And we will see each other tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Good morning and welcome back to Dollars and Cents. I'm Darren Jacobs, a Senior Financial Advisor, and I'm here to guide you through smart financial decisions that can protect your wealth and boost your bottom line. Now, today's episode is a bit of a touchy topic, right?